Yemo bibia kwa ba enfamra mega TV and platform we so na busia kurom ha edo esanse omo ahase ahiti Ghana na enkofo kan sim bi, but before that no je meme yakọ nyekoti argument bi between Felix Ofosu Kwaakye our government spokesperson as a government communication minister na bibisa ono na okasama aban efiri Jubilee House. Oni Dr Okoe Boye Luzukuku, former member of parliament and former deputy health minister, right? Yes. Clash on Metro TV. Then how Felix Ofosu Kwaakye brilliantly schooled Okoe Boye on live television. Na analysis in top notch. Na sebi. They be a NPP for the omunya adwen bra more power agyeso omu afiri aban mu and so omunya sa ideas ni we nim ba bia omunya ni firi anyway je be kọ ne kuti ensen emu nkire mu na ekoba ya to aso ede ama Onyankopon enka obibia ehun kurom ha de sesei hanomai heat yan kombre ekoba e be to aso
the record of around 58%. Now that kind of mandate jolts you into reality. It tells you that the people of Ghana are watching. And for many years, they had given the NPP a long rope to operate. They had observed them. They renewed their mandate in 2020, albeit by a smaller margin compared to how they won in 2016. So from right then, the signs were very clear, that the people of Ghana were unhappy about the way things had gone, except that they wanted to give them the benefit of the doubts and hope that an extension of the mandate will provide scope for correction of some of the mistakes and the righting of some of the wrongs and the implementation of policies that were sound, that would sit well with them. But it does appear that things actually deteriorated in the 4 years that the people of Ghana thought they could do better. And so they were left with no option than to boot them out in 2024. So having been the direct beneficiaries of that action by the people of Ghana, we do not need a soothsayer to tell us what our fate will be if we fail to perform to the expectations of the people of Ghana. And so from the very first day, we have been acutely aware of what the people of Ghana want, what it takes to meet their expectations and what they think we should do on their behalf. So it started with the formation of a government. You recall that President Mahama issued an executive instrument in which he indicated that he was going to shrink the size of government. It was a key promise. I mean, one of the things that angered the people of Ghana the most about the Akufo-Addo administration was the sheer number of ministers and the size of government. I mean, having 120 ministers for a country our size was simply not justifiable. And so President Mahama sought to address that. So the executive instrument named 23 ministries, and about 6 or so ministries had been chalked off, reducing the numbers significantly. Some of the offices were also reduced in terms of scope and size. Like the Information Ministry, for instance, it was collapsed into the Government Communication Office, which I head, and which is located at the presidency, even though I've still inherited the agencies that the Ministry of Information used to superintend. And similar arrangements have been done elsewhere. So 60 ministers were announced by the deadline of 21st January. Currently, there are 58 because of the tragic circumstances of August 6th. And we are functioning just fine. Indeed, things are much better than 12 months ago. And so we have proven that you do not need a legion of appointees, ministers, and other functionaries to be able to run a government efficiently. And that a leaner, smarter government is a much preferred option. And in fact, because of the commitment that President Mahama made during the campaign, he first said he would run government with 60 ministers. It compelled Dr. Bawumia to also promise to run government with 50 ministers. When he was vice president of a government that had 120 ministers at some point. Indeed, by the time that they left office, they had around 80 ministers or so, if I'm not mistaken. And that was a large number that the people of Ghana were simply unhappy about. So that was done. There were things like oral. Even before President Mahama took office, he initiated moves to implement Operation Recover or Loot, which is a campaign promise like any other, and a special program designed to exact accountability from members of the previous government. And thankfully, the Attorney General has been on hand to provide consistent briefings on some of the key cases that he has busted. Currently, there are about 8 or 10 people on trial for various offenses. The Edubuahin case, the SkyTrain case, the National Service case involving about 2.4 billion Ghana cedis. The buffer stock case, the case involving wound to me, and many others. There are at least about 20 cases that are ready to also go to trial. And indeed, all things being equal, next week, the Attorney General will be on hand to offer a briefing on another case that he has cracked and is about to go to court on. So he will bring Ghanaians up to speed on that. So oil is working, it's firing on all cylinders, except that, of course, oil was promised to be delivered within the context of the rule of law. So people are not going to be lined up and shot. We are going to take them through due process. Sometimes it takes a bit of time, but it is necessary so that we are meticulous in the preparations towards the case, and that an innocent person is not thrown into jail because of haste, indecent haste, to show that you are working. I think it is better that we take our time and get a try so that we do not unfairly and unjustly imprison people or punish people who have done no wrong. It is only those who are deserving of punishment who should be punished. But more, the biggest and most significant objective that Pregama set for himself was to turn around the economy, because it was the biggest problem that Ghanaians faced. Indeed, the anger with which they voted against the NPP revolved around economic mismanagement and how people suffered, how millions of Ghanaian households were thrown into hardships and suffering and escalating cost of living, which stemmed directly from economic mismanagement, despite what the NPP says. I mean, they cite COVID, for instance, but that has long been discredited, because indeed when you do the comparative analysis with all countries in Africa or sub-Saharan Africa who were also afflicted by COVID, you see that we were the worst off. We defaulted on our debt, we couldn't pay our debt. At a point around 2022 or 2023, our debt to GDP ratio was 104%. In other words, if somehow magically we could convert all of our GDP into resources for the country and use it to do one bullet payment of our debt, we will require another 4% of our GDP to be able to pay it off. That was how bad the situation was. Our credit rating was junk. Our currency plummeted. Indeed, in between June and November 2022, it moved from 6 cedis to 17 cedis. In fact, they inherited it at just around 4 cedis. Then there was some slight improvement. By the time they left office, it was selling in forex bureaus between 16 and 17 cedis. On the interbank market, it was almost 15 cedis. You know, so our currency had collapsed. And this was despite the recitation of
2024.
2024, yes.
It was around 14. Between 14,
that is interbank.
14, 15.
It's 14 interbank. But when you went to the forex bureau,
It was almost 17.
it was almost 17. Yes.
Okay.
And I know for a fact, because there are transactions that I did around the time. So I know. And indeed, businessmen know. The reality is that the way our economy operates is not only in banks that you get foreign exchange. The forex bureaus are authorized currency dealers. So you can go there. And it's also one of the benchmarks to assess the state of your currency. So what I'm saying is known to everybody who will be honest. And Ghanaians felt it. Bob Marley said it, that he who knows it, he who feels it, what knows it. So there's no dispute about this. This led to a spiral in inflation, because we are heavily import dependent. So at a point, inflation was what, 54%. This is around 2022, around the same period. Then the debt default came and further constrained our efforts as a country. And the hardships knew no bounds. Prices escalated. People simply could not bear it. At a point in 2022-2023, fuel was selling for 23 Ghana cedis a litre at the pump. That is diesel. And then petrol sold around 15 or 16 cedis, or 18 cedis if I'm not mistaken. And you know the catastrophic impact that has on transport fares, which then translates into food inflation. And food inflation became so high at a point it was 69%. Earlier, as I speak to you, it's around 9% or 6%. So, no, this was a circumstance under which Ghanaians yearned for change. And then to cap it all, there was the domestic debt exchange, which was only a sanitized way of saying that you are restructuring your debt. In other words, you can't pay your debt, and so you are asking your creditors to allow you to defer the principal payment and make huge cuts on their interest payments. Now, many of those who invest in government bonds are people in the middle class. So the DDEP impacted adversely on Ghana's middle class. About 1.3 million of them, including pensioners. No, you have been around for some time. In all the 2 decades or so that you've been at this in the media, have you ever seen a situation where pensioners had to storm the finance ministry periodically to demand payments?
Strike knowledge, it was historic.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it was his strike knowledge.
So much so that a former Supreme Court judge, Justice of Akufo, had to join the fray to highlight the plight of pensioners. So things were bad. And there was no way that any reasonable people could or retain a government like this. And Moro, this was brought on by economics management.
Right.
The heart of it was that, you see, COVID became an excuse for recklessness. In economic management in your life, Moro, if for any reason this organization were to suffer a downturn, I mean, touch wood, and so your income reduces and all other sources dry up, the first thing you do is to cut your budget, adjust. But they didn't do that. When they suffered a hit with our revenue, they decided to escalate expenditure because elections were coming. They were sharing money to party executives, taking state funds and sharing around. You remember what Felix told us, that regional executives were receiving in excess of 170,000 cedis. Constituency executives were getting around 100,000. And indeed, all of us who were campaigning knew they were sending money, 5,000 cedis to key campaigners, branch executives, or they call it police station executives and what have you, under the name of some COVID support. That's how they dissipated resources. Then there was financial indiscipline. In other words, they spent more than they budgeted for. So the finance minister goes to parliament and tells them that because of COVID, we have revised our deficit numbers. So we said we would do 5%, but because of COVID, let us do 11% or so. No, around 10%. After COVID, when the books were assessed, they had done 15%. And between 2020 and 2023, they ran 3 consecutive years of deficits in double digits. And that is what escalated our debt. Once our debt escalated, investors became edgy. They began to pull out their investments, which are dollar denominated. In fact, the Bank of Ghana itself tells us that within those 2 years, about $6 billion was spirited out of this economy. That immediately put pressure on our currency. And that's how come the currency plummeted. Of course, they danced around it, recited slogans. They claimed that they were doing what? A gold accumulation policy at the Bank of Ghana. So they had 30 tons of gold. And yet the currency plummeted. The reason for that is that the gold that they had accumulated at the central bank only gave some confidence to the market that if there was a need to make substantial payments in foreign exchange to defray our debt, they could simply offload some gold. Because gold is a precious metal which is hot on the market. But that doesn't give you liquidity. The reason why we have done better and are able to get $10 billion to intermediate, not intervene, intermediate, is that we have the gold board policy, which is mopping up close to 80% of gold produced in Ghana for export and repatriation of the funds here. So the central bank can have it to boost our reserves, which is now nearing $12 billion. Put some on the market for business people who want it and the commercial banks to have access to. So all that the Bank of Ghana does is to take money from the commercial banks, give to gold board to purchase gold, export, and get foreign exchange for the market. That is how come we have been able to sustain the currency. Such that today, for the first time, remember, you have also been around. Okoe Boye has been around. We are around the same age. For all my life, I have never heard of a situation where the city has appreciated sustainably up to the point where this year it has appreciated 34%. Around the same time last year, it depreciated 27%. When we look at the rate of inflation, it is 6.5 today. There's indication that it may even go lower by December. Look at our debt. Because of the management of the exchange rate alone, close to 50 to 70 billion dollars, Ghana cedis, has been chopped off our debt. So from around 730 billion when we took over, it's now around 680 billion. Look at interest rates. They have come down because the policy rate is around what? 15% or so. The exchange rate, the impact it has had. Because of that, fuel prices have reduced and transport fares have been reduced. Because of that, moreover, evidence exists that shows that up to 4,500 different items have had their prices reduced. And you see, Guta were summoned to Parliament by the Committee on Economy in Parliament, which has NPP, NDC members, and they were confronted with complaints by the people of Ghana about price reduction, and they produced evidence that 4,500 different items have had their prices slashed. On top of all the economic actions that they foisted on us, Moro, they slapped tax upon tax upon tax on us. So they introduced the COVID levy, they introduced e-levy, they introduced sanitation levy and betting tax. In the very first pages of our 2024 manifesto, we promised to scrap them. Moro, only this week, the COVID levy has been removed, which adds up to 3 other taxes that have been removed. And that is pressure taken off the people of Ghana, even as steps have been taken to reduce the cost of living. So any rational human being who lives in Ghana, who has lived in this country, at least in the last year and this year, would attest that there's a dramatic transformation in the economic fortunes. And this has been the result of deliberate policy. One of the things that has underpinned our performance, Moro, is fiscal discipline, because that is what makes the difference. Anytime you live outside of your means, you will perpetually be in debt and you will struggle. That's what the NPP did. We are avoiding that. There is strict adherence to fiscal discipline. If you read the budget that the finance minister presented, he hinted at a 4% drop in revenue compared to the projections. Yet he also did about a 14 to 15% cut in expenditure to ensure that even as revenue has slightly underperformed, we don't overspend. So he has kept within limits. If we were ever able to do that as a country, we won't fall into the problems that we've had, because our history shows that every time we've had the cyclical 8-year economic crisis, it has been because of fiscal indiscipline, the inability of government to withstand pressure. Because once you do that, pressure will build from even colleague ministers, government officials who want to engage in procurement. So they will put pressure on you from your political party and from the larger Ghanaian society, because they want things done. But you need to hold the line, because the implication of not doing so will be dire for everybody, as we all saw under the NPP. So the difference has been the fiscal discipline.
Okay.
Now, more if you go into areas like health, energy. Let me speak about energy and health, and then perhaps
Please be brief, Pastor, so I can bring in
energy.
Yes.
Look, we inherited a disaster. The first official activity of President Mahama after his swearing in was to convene an emergency meeting of all stakeholders in the energy sector, because we were on the verge of a major energy cut. Because again, scorched earth policy. They decided that they won't buy fuel to fire thermal plants, even as they had agreed with the West African gas pipeline to maintain their pipeline so that gas will not flow for about a month. So immediately we had to scramble. And then you notice that about a month or 2 or 3 into our administration, we began to experience some instability in power supply. That was because many of the equipment of ECG had been worn out. They were not investing in it. What they did was that they were engaging in procurement that they didn't need for about 15 years. So they went to buy cables that they didn't need for about 15 years. They programmed to spend about 900 million in 2024. They spent 8 billion, far in excess of their budget, and created huge debt. We inherited close to 80 billion Ghana cedis of debt in the energy sector alone. The cash for waterfall mechanism, which was a system put in place to ensure that money flows seamlessly to all players in the sector, was abused and not honored. Since we've been in power, we've strictly adhered to it. And that is the reason why IPPs are no longer threatening to shut down power supply. That's why West African gas pipeline is not threatening. Because the energy minister, on the instruction of President Mahama, has insisted that must be adhered to. The reckless procurement at ECG has also been kept So they can't do what they were doing in the past. So there's greater discipline there. And they are in the process, they've been able to replace a number of their key equipment. That is how come there's stability. Today, generation meets demand exactly. But you find that we are even projecting into the future. So in the budget, the finance minister has said that up to 1,200 megawatts of power will be added in the next 3 years or so through some massive $1.2 billion investment to ensure that we keep up to speed with demand. If you come to health, and Dr. Okoe Boye was in charge of health, so he would know. He was constantly dogged with demands for payments by service providers. And we know the huge shortfall that existed in NHIS. First of all, they had capped it. So a substantial part of their money was not coming to them. They put it into other areas that have nothing to do with health. Meanwhile, NHIS is dedicated to health financing. So we uncapped it and have made the resources available. Moro, when was the last time you heard of service providers complaining about non-payment of claims? Indeed, the last time I met Dr. Bambu, he made me aware that he has money sitting in his account and he's actually waiting on service providers to come and make claims. Okay. So now, for the first time, service providers are the ones lagging behind in terms of processing of their claims to have their money paid. And because of the allocations that have been made to health, about 11 billion cedis to the health insurance, we are about to start the free primary health care policy, which essentially means that diseases that are not serious, that are not life-threatening, can be treated at the basic level of healthcare, which is the CHIPS compounds. The Mahama Cares program, the Ghana Medical Trust Fund, also has about 2.3 billion Ghana cedis allocated to it. About 1.5 billion has been allocated to free primary health care. And Mahama Cares has 2.3 billion. And this is a key campaign promise. What it would mean is that those who used to suffer chronic diseases, who had no hope, now have hope. And the minister has indicated that once you put in an application, within very reasonable time, very short time, your application will be responded to, processed, so that you can receive the health care that you need, because those diseases are pretty serious. They are non-communicable, but they are very serious chronic diseases which afflict people. So I can go on and on. Look at the agri sector. More as I speak to you, in the last 3 weeks, up to about 3 million beds are being distributed across the country. And once that is done, feed and other inputs will be given to those who have received it. That is under the Nkoko Nketenkete program to boost poultry production. Indeed, the agri minister tells me that they have a target of reaching 104% self-sufficiency in poultry production in Ghana in the next 4 to 5 years. Currently, it's around 12%. We are only able to cater for 12% of our needs as a country. They want to take it to 28% next year, about 60% in 2027, and then above 100% in 2028, 2029. You notice that about 2 weeks ago, the president went to Bechim to cut sod for a poultry processing plant, which is part of the effort to have a value chain that addresses the shortfalls that we have in poultry production. So there's so much that is going on that I could speak about. So if you ask me in a nutshell, every objective, rational analysis of Ghana's situation would attest that there is vast improvement. In fact, finally, permit me. Look at education. For some reason, the NPP focused solely on education, on free SHS. They neglected basic education and tertiary education. No, even though they ramped up free senior high school, the free senior high school policy, they were simply unable to fund it properly. When we came in, there was a debt of about 3 billion cedis. And then in addition to that, there were chronic shortages or acute shortages in food supply. Every now and then, Moro, you are the media organization, your reporters reported on how schools were complaining. We saw the food that the children were eating, completely unwholesome food, because they simply didn't have the money to send to the schools. President Mama, indeed, the second activity that President Mama engaged in after the first meeting of the NDC sector with us was to convene a meeting between CHAS, headmasters, and government, and other stakeholders, Ghana Education Service and Ministry of Education, on how to resolve this feeding program. So he ordered that immediately feeding should be prioritized. So between January and now, 1.5 billion Ghana cedis has been released to feed pupils in senior high school. That's why you don't hear those noises again. Other inputs are also going. Look at basic education. for 6 academic terms, or 6 terms, I beg your pardon, they could not print textbooks for basic pupils in Ghana. As I speak to you, 586 million cedis has been earmarked to do that. Capitation grant was in arrears for several terms. It has been increased and it has been paid. We are current. School feeding, we are current on payments. And there was a deficit of about 3 million desks for school children. No, I can report that currently efforts are underway to distribute 2 million desks. And I know because when you go to Abakrampa Senior High School, which is Abu Asebu Kamankesi, and Abakrampa is my hometown, I had the honor of going to present 600 desks to the school. They requested for 1,000. But once I got in touch with Getfan, we were able to mobilize 600 to give to them instantly. And I donated another 200 to Agri Memorial in the same weekend. Only last week, Laboni Senior High School, it was reported that they didn't have desks. The Ministry of Education was able to send them 3,000 desks to meet that need. These were some of the shortfalls in the education system when the NPP was superintending this country. And within a matter of 1 year, we are able to...
Doc, what are your reflections 2024, a year later?
Well, let me say that I'd like to start by, when your flyer came out, I got some few calls last night and this morning, apparently from institutional suppliers to the free SHS program, those who supply rice, oil, mackerel and all that across the country. And their claim is that they've done a lot of supplies to the free SHS program. And it appears government is not paying. Now, they themselves told me that their engagements with the education minister went very well, but finance is not responding. So I asked them 2 questions. Why are you calling me? Because some of the people who called me, when I told them last year, a year ago, that they support us, they said, Doctor, you guys, you are going. But they jokingly said that they know Felix is on the show, so he can talk to the government. So they should. Apparently, it's also because in a few weeks, they need to get money to get stock for Christmas. They also supply the public. So, presidential spokesperson, this strategy by Atu of squeezing the neck of people who do work with government, he should loosen the rope because it's getting to Christmas. More. So this is a public interest, and apparently what they are saying is that going forward, if they don't get my response, it will affect their reliability to supply to the schools. Okay. Now, 1 year on, the Bible tells us that there is a time and season for everything. There are seasons. There are times of triumph, and there are times when you become the vanquished. There are times when you cry at a funeral, and there are times when you dance until your clothes fall off. That is how the world operates. There are times when a political party will lose an election. But you guys, you don't even have to go and read during the days of Napoleon. Don't go far. Read only 8-10 years back. You've been at your lowest points before. So 1 year on, I'm surprised and I'm not surprised. Look, President Kufuor came into office at a time when the power sector, power availability, energy was a big problem under John Mahama. We said we were going to make sure that the lights stay on. We came at a time when the government was under so much pressure that they were trying to close fiscal gaps. That led them to putting taxes on condoms and machetes. History is good, though. Even this one is not long history. This one is a history. It came to a time 17.5 was put on financial transactions. People say, hey, what kind of government is this? You got to go. And they went. They went in a grand style. And some of our people were consumed by the excitement. Oh, that's the end of NDC. But the most important is that when we came, we did things that reminds me of what is happening now. We removed the 17.5 on machetes and financial transactions. We abolished the taxes on special import levy. We abolished. Growth had shrunk from about 12% or so, somewhere from about 14% when oil came into commercial production in 2012. It had come down all the way to 3.5. If you look at the graph, growth was like this. Inflation was going up. Debt was going up. Similar to the things they tell us. Akufo-Addo's first term saw to an increase again in the growth pattern, GDP. Which means that you are creating opportunities, you are building wealth, you are able to afford social programs. Beyond that, inflation also started to trend downwards. We had some single-digit inflation the first time. For the first time in many years, we started to experience primary surplus, which is a comparison of what you are raising revenue minus your expenditure when we put aside debt servicing. For the first time in a long time. And that normally gives you an idea of prudence because it shows that you are not borrowing to fund your basic things. And the Akufo-Addo first time, in this Ghana, a program like Free SHS, huge, massive program in terms of fiscal impact, in terms of the money you need. There were people in our own party who said, don't try it. It's too much of a pressure on the fiscal space. Take your time. Akufo-Addo said, no, we are moving. We can do it. We realized that even the spaces were not enough for Ghanaians. We had to think outside the box. He said, okay, run a double track. Better for all Ghanaian kids to have access to the teacher than for some to go to the teacher and others to stay at home. I remember, I'll not mention, we had a fine man in this country who said, oh, if I have 3 billion, I'm not going to spend on a recurrent expenditure. I'll put into capital expenditure. I'll build infrastructure. But the Free SHS won. And so President Akufo-Addo stuck to his word and we implemented. All in the first term of Akufo-Addo. And then as we enter the second term, we are human beings. There were some actions which I say that were outside our control. There were some actions to mistakes which were within our control. But Moro, are you surprised? When you have a collection of human beings running a government, you have some of these things. So in the second term, things were going well until we had a pandemic. And when you say, they said, don't mention it. But they say so because it serves their purpose. Moro. If you have a pandemic, that makes all of a sudden Gasem sell cement at 2 times the price. In fact, 100% increase. Why? Because freight had gone up. Because all shipping lines closed. And the resumption, there was pressure on the few shipping lines that were operating. The NDC will conveniently tell you, don't mention that. But it is a fact. We lived with it in this country. He knows economics. He knows about imported inflation. The whole world went to sleep. When China started producing, once demand was more than the supply, prices of goods went up before they even entered this country. They call it imported inflation. But Felix will tell you, don't mention it. Because if Felix listens to that, it means he might stay longer in opposition. The price of crude, I wrote it. Crude price in 2017 was $60 per barrel. In 2018, 65. Tomorrow, it moved as high as 86 in 2021. When crude goes up, it affects electricity, it affects transportation, it affects standard of living. Felix will tell you, Okoe Boye, just keep quiet, let's move on. Because he knows that these are the things that might make someone go like, wait a minute. It appears these guys were hit by stuff. But it's not surprising. This is the life of the politician globally. It's not an isolated case. In the US, prices of gas, which is fuel, they told Biden, you are a joke because prices have gone up. When Biden was telling them, look, it is a global phenomenon. It's because now.
All right, so that is it. Enti in sema na ekosona. Utum say clearly no. NPP for person mu dintro e de go NDC for so. Mu kire mu a 1 year of bibi no NDC for nyanya hwe. But omo yi afiri se dollar abafom a e ma ye judgment debt esote Ghana ka ye di esote nti for the first time a dollar abafom a Ghana ye kaswati Akufo-Addo ne Bawumia ka obobugu ho no judgment debt yes aka no esote ye dollar na abafom eswati. Second pensioners ka omoji ye a omontimi ntua momo no a binimfo ahunwu yi ene de kai ka ho do ma ba obetua momo. That is omo share is it bonds and bisa and whatever they call. And thirdly, alawa, nursing trainee alawa, any teacher trainee alawa, obaye wabeye. Chese fourth, free tertiary, tuition free. Also, kwa school for first year, baby to Onyanye na university Onyanye. Also, you disabled that obey them, obey make sure, obey make sure say obey show school from level 100 to the last level I would be you. I don't know obey walanchi a jumapa and the other initiatives 24-hour economy ekoso was some of the institutions, especially Temahabo kwa ekoso and other institutions. NPP for to one no we did it. Na be somebody to ja a tropa de NPP for munja did that. Yine ukruma ye shom 2028 bedru no beko kuto abamo mo na mase be di dwaye wo Ghana for ye so no say ye hwe anoma bi ni so yenti no ye ko be beto so one kwame amu okay FM
Nana Boakye, Nintawdi Nanabi, and Prempren, the national organizer at the Mawas Namanyoko NPP. La Nat. Yes, I can be na Yabon Como. And Comonigina, and Samba could be so. Titrune Pandai, Ehun Samoa Bebe, and then we will scatter in other areas and so. Nanabia Samba, Manasuntian and Mo and Como. Nana Mache.
I am do so.
Pachana Boko, dear.
And I'm possible now as well.
Oh, Admiral Qua, and this old dear.
Oh, there be, oh, dear.
Oh, because Monday no na me tie when you run na me he was it a you run woman na Tuesday you run na said there all kind of so evidence of good living na na ho ye papa na o recount it another who account for and some abeba with regards to NDC 1 year in government said there uhu niema na nka wo mark wo mo ade ode be ma wo mo na me so ene na ho ye do my 1 year and so any
oh no kwasem ni baby a ode me asha ase afi no kwade on mani age afinie mamindi kan tia watifo wahwefo bubi a okọ no nyuma so mo mutu kwan nyina no ye de nyame nkira e de mo no pay afinie sene obusa ya yeto aba e de ma eye NDC for no kwasem ni me gidie pa na se Ghana for dodo for na Ghana for dodo na omanu omo ho overwhelming endorsement say nkunimdia Ghana for the ma NDC for no na ekire nkunimdia ye wo awreshimu sonko e de wo Yewura Mahama ni NDC for mu say nsem wo mo ka de a yemfa tumi maom no mo be sachira niemani ohine e ba edi tumi je o mo nsa mo ba ya nkra be 30,000 a mo ye Ghana for o manya adwuma o mo ye o made ni yi o mo nyina di sa o mo ba nso no ma hwebo se o mo di bibi ba e fe no 24-hour economy na 24-hour economy na advert o mo ye nya no mo se 133 se adwuma ba ku bia e 3 shift adwuma ba ku bia 3 shift ebi ko anopa no o ma pon awia na ebi asumu awia no na o mo de akwa akosi anwumre kakra na ebi so asumu anwumre de afamu na juda su na de akwa kupia ahomache the 133 ebesi ne ena sa woti asante regional NDC chairman se pressure wono sunu ntimi na fie nkofo be guni fie ntizia na wotukura fie onya adwuma ya reshumu amebunu nya eso ma benya adwuma no eno enya nkwe na no woti se anesses for krampo a ye for mo adwuma mu 1 year ni ebi okwa before ansa no mo ba teacher for ye for mo adwuma mu 1 year ni yentio mo ka omusu mo kam NDC for na ye dede ebra ye kwa ye ya adwun se o ye kwa kope eye another jet near the ama ye military for na ye dede eno kwa ne se ba kope ne kwa koto mini abuja jemfie ne o ye deputy defense minister ye dede kasa ye tie mu Yan dream man ho. NDC National Communications Officer. Same. Ye did yan dream man ho. Chairman Azedun Ketia. Aye Ope President. Or the President of Kuwado. As a strong man yare. And no more buy a more quality or more carbon.
Okay.
Maku and 9 no Mwakoto. And 9 Bakuna air crack as he told me who did this. I know. Who could you tell black or ye who did this? Or my carbon and 9 and Mwakoto. Now only Dr. B. Ekasa. Every day. Dr. Anekasa, I mean, Shirano. Yet that's one of Quaff on Mwasi. Shankomana need the nano lithium you buy. Your crown your cancer at 10%. And this is what said there be that. There be that. Men and everyone be on tea, lithium means to a from a good year. They send you too good. Jessica Kokoi. Any diamond near the no lithium no see idea no from sa manganese sa me tie ene abefo ne ma aba eye car sa enyusi petrol ne le electric room near the anya de ye enti eya ade a so mo pa ye kasa Ghana benya kafa ohamu ntitemu edu ewom NDC for sorry mom ho so yen ye pese ye bo Ghana koro no esi wia Ghana. And no more, you know. 7 cow the way you be crown by more to wa. I cannot monocle. Cow your buy and 10% you run another danko kufa the yes in Kenwo Honum. Manu. Or not free 10%, maybe 5%. Jesus Christ. I could sure Sansa for Damarama for. Dean tro, how many Dean tro? And the 10% na gain na do danko akufu ado. E dey ban omudu o mahian e dey about 5%. Na do danko abreso. First year nkania bo wantum, enso bo wantum. In fact the second year kwa dey osati tin nkania bo so. E group baby covid kwampa enso kwampo ni enjoy the free. And Yera Mahama Baye or no so or the Nemafu Bibano. A fee in Subo Yatumum Prensa. A fee in Kania Bo Yatumum Prensa. A Jumaya Fakatia or Tumu or Hamun Chichemodia at 30%. Yera Mahama Baye 9%. Yet the 1 city at the 2 liter piazzo. The Genesis gallon beer night at the 4 cities and after so. Like a 1 gallon beer with the 4 cities and after so. Who say, oh, the dollar bathroom? Don't you crown so go for a rebu credit or munyabi? Any punk a dollar bathroom there and can't know to in canium. I don't know what to assume. And if about from petrol, you're teaching petrol. And then you're born a crossroad. Everybody will be any man, you're born crossroad. You was what to your master here. And you have to fish out. You had the $10 billion. $10 billion. And yes, at every bank of Ghana, they're so more. $10 billion. They're so. Shagalam say, send your NDC for executives. At your book, at your book, a major, or mania, and yet in Bonnie, as I bay for. And then the only as rap for quantity a book punimpo. MP Mua, it me the enemy Galam say for any as rap for any tax force from Kukuntoba. And these executives and I was surprised. Since I'm one of the Mamu executives in the bar, yɛbɛma mo asɛe kwaeɛ no ɛna national security operatives no mu bi ɛhyehyɛ ɔmo akyi na ɔmo hyɛ kwaeɛ ebi wɔ ha bɛkɔkɔ na ɔmo na ɛbɔ ɔmo ho ban ɔmo di kanam sɛ yɛdede yɛwura Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo baeɛ for close to 2 years ne abane ɛyɛ small scale mining na ade no muntimi nyɛ ɛnɛ yɛde gold board aba na legalize galamsey na sɛ gold board for ɔmo to gold ne free ɛyɛ galamsey for hɔ ɔmo to gold ne free galamsey for no nti no legalize galamsey no yɛwura Mahama na anum ton na no ɔno ane press fo hyia ne ebusa ne saa asɛm no asɛm a ɔkae ne sɛ sɛ yɛto free galamsey for hɔ ka sense ɛhwe ɛyɛ ayɛ dia you imagine. This is presidential endorsement of galamsey. Presidential endorsement of galamsey. At this everywhere. And then quite almost so openly. Now, Kumasi and Kwaakye International Kwame and Kofu Busomon Fahon. Almost police are in Kwampo and form. And then Yen Swooning now, yes, I did in Adane. Ebunebuno, is here yen swooning in another near Tete. At Tete. 1 year NDC. 1 year in NDC.
And then we got a debut at Obobeto, you know. Nanke near Tianke Bianca, almost so ten.
Mr. Omobai, come here, quiet, not Danko Akufo-Addo Boye in the first 2 years and Kwapo stopping illegal mining. Obi who's in swooning Oko records, no. Now, share. Ɛyɛ ɛkwan a yɛnsuo na ani fasiti a wo sɛ saa brɛ no na ɛyɛ papa ɛkyɛn ne ɛne na meka sɛ ne adane atete ɛde po anka wo hyɛ bɔ kan sɛm akɛse saa de gu NDC fo so ɛnɛ LGBTQ ɔmo dwane firi ho adeɛ ɔmo de yɛ campaign kɛseɛ baako paa sɛ Ghana deɛ yɛasɔre sɛm yɛkɛ mu som yɛmammerɛ no yɛmpɛ mmarima ne mmarima sɛm mpɛ mmaa ne mmaa sɛm ɛna ɔmo ɔmo dwane firi ho it's been 1 year of recklessness hwɛ deɛ bɛyɛ paa na wobɛtumi de abɔ yɛwura Mahama asafohene sɛ where do you buy you who say and get back part? Somebody should tell me. You run another Dankwa Akufo-Addo Boye in the first year, September, one of the free SHS by not Ghana United there. Piasum. Nana,
Nema Bebreba, Abaiba, you are lunch, Jumeura, lunch, Uncle Conketing, Ketua lunch. I know, no, sorry. Uncle Conketing. Uncle Conketing. Most of some for the NDC executives, I hope you met me and Coconabu. See why, Nana big push in so
push and the na it is going to work for you. I think to have them catch $10 billion. Hope City be. Almost them not $10 billion. I hopeless. $10 billion be. And I do more things here. To my you rather another Dankwa Akufo-Addo Boye and of Uncle project on somebody can be pushing the normal for they are charging 60%. So what they can be pushing. And they should tell me, in fact, about almost all the projects almost Kenyani and the man, yes, I said that. It's a big push. Big push. So now, Shadia, sanitary pass, Yakopim. Now, Mr. Media Fire Munkatum. When you so been a comment, Boys happened to Tiakoja Chema. Who have a catcher and a sanitary part? Yatiso from a year 45 cities and say near Tonono. And they Muslim about 15 cities. And then I was there 25 cities closer. And I'm Muslim about 15 cities. Yeah, that's it. I mean, so we a Ministry of Finance on one cast official page. And a year at the force and also about Parliament at the time. This is here, sanitary parts about 15 cities. Good. And we say now about Parliament. While I come home, Busika or the Bayano. We see, Kwaakye sanitary park 6.6 million. Maku 6.6 na chama. Ya mo en koda o masatia so mu chima. I will be on man no kwenti onko school. Okay, no problem. Na eno we calculation just a simple calculation. Mo to 6.6. Mo chesika over 292 million Ghana cedis. We a simple calculation. We enya dia ehu enya rocket science. Mo kwakoto mo se ade no mo chesika 292 million ade kwakoto. Who divided by 6.6 million million. Unya se omoto ba ku bia 45 Ghana cedis. 45 Ghana cedis. Not just say 192 million Ghana cedis akwa obi botom. We enye obi na eka. Enye ye na obi akudi document bi aba na afa na beka document okra e fake. Enye obi na akwa kobwa ura esuma si bi aka kofa bi aba na aka se wo ko bi afa fi kwampo na enye no kre. Wo wo si ati sanitary park so di aba 15 cedis. Wo to bi ama school ko dawo. Wo to 6.6 million. We a simple calculation about could be a motor, or mono motor matisunu, or motor on the 45 cities. 192 million simple for you. 1 year. Then you ever want to say, Omanya overwhelming majority in parliament. That's it. And no matter how fuck with you can be concerned over by no mukuta. Goodwill. Yantum Ghana and Farmer NDC fool. Yet the 2 minutes say almost family rain Ghana for them. Now, Omafa, a year, Sa to me at the moment, Omafa Ghana for you know, no moon. Omobayano, so when you see justice all okay, but to know. And Omafa, and they hold to justice yet to know nim. I don't country the two. Ke kan samba saba de guma mi so no metu no. Eno mu di hu aba be hye ajadis for no dodo na mu.
Na nei nti you know no senka 1 year in government o marke aban year over 100.
3.
Say
3.
Oh, Mahama K in na chire.
Mahama K e be kai se ni hodo da.
101.7.
Ira na nado dankwa akufuado apen so ba o se mu kina na ni papa onu kofa ba ye no eye John ajekum kufuo papa enra echi eno di na woda wo kwa kofa ba echi jere ni John K ne de ye wo national health insurance scheme it is all say yare bi wo ma de tusu bi na kafa eno an so de be ka ho. That is what I operate over the years for this infrastructure, by the structures all over the National Health Insurance Authority. It is all balance. We used to KFB poor. Now they call a cocoma a year Peter, then why? And then I don't care.
And a dollar no so. And
it's dollar no quaddy. It's a fake reduction because look, and never something $1 non cover from then. The intention is that also can never walk up from. I didn't know to come him. I didn't know 1 year you put in swim 3 times. You don't can 3 times. 1 year me. Never one equals because get the 10 billion Ghana cedis every Bank of Ghana and yet they're so into a artificial. And you know, and that it does not reflect. Mr. And the two coins is here and there's also and there's taxes. The Omoba film coin over the 8 taxes and one about a poor one. You did to issue ye kufa and 8. They run another uncle kufa in 1 year. No, we taxing before. In fact, the first and second year now, taxes in Kwana, which came 17. So how does the dollar now also the action and reflect in Gofo Susom Kokomun yes it can be and Vanya Juma and the boy wants for him. Oko Bank of Ghana, you see, and we want some of the rate now to 11, and so called market cover. Oko now system. In fact, I think Kwan here, you say, Oko Bank Kwana Popebia, Bank for the Yama, no more friend, black market, maybe a large beauty baby, no more friend, so China or Hana on a DC Canada. Yako Bank or his Ubia. One crowd will see the crowd so you can also the undertaking, also which will say what would say of this how they call, which say would take it how they call, which in
3% Nana B.
When you did a pan, not done for the power, what you say, and someone making say Galamsia or stopping small scale mining. He was bold, not stopping. And any market is here, AD and Yano. What if you elitist me? No buy a boat, no banana. 2 years. How, why, and how? And when you're bold enough to do that, that because at the gold board, Senate Professor, I 7 other kind. Gold board is the legalization of Galamsey. If you know the Abba. And you know, Obi can tell me say, Nanado Danko Kufado. September would be 3 years by no. A man Ghana Munya Deno. Would there be a pana here on Muhammad Diaba? What give a monumental 24-hour economy na net dog man pan and Komokano. You run another Kufadoba. No 3 years net than no power, no being who said in the flagship or come some power. You buy a 1 year not buy. Upo 24-hour economy na Moody Chanyon. A baby at the Fabia. Mahama is the hope. Mahama is the hope. 24-hour economy. The Mahama government no much hope and they hopeless. And no more NDC for me saying to be a century is not NDC chairman. And soon say I see another head thing. Until next year. And you're America. And you me. And I shall grab control exams. Me boss has a Misuana Mensu. 200,000 cannot progress.
But I'm just no common what to say. One of the suburb Travigator schools is and by no a being committed fee several months and son a being so swap.
Nana, Obeka Sakamna. Say, can you some like a walk upon that the one can see a walk?
Eh.
And I said, there will be a sword this what the free is about. Double track now at the Bayano. It was rather the increasing contact hours. Double track no yano. It was solid. Nana Temple College infrastructure. You did free SHS by and clients on cheap in the PC school. Indeed, a year dormitories are a war Temple College a bear and Konono. Now you're marking. Then Kwani Dabetre if you bear 3 months, 2 months. No, be any school, no school on your done it. We meanwhile, and Kwani be so a person and they will be an anchor, Sikasema Babe and Hauno, or Pusoku school. Abai said, Debbie. Sana said, ya Wemuko na ya increase contact hours. A bra Wemama Pino. And 9 on ya Diadini Guhono. You better a teacher for Bebre. Sanse because who pay you were teacher for Bebre no more. 1.7. Na we are Yaman Kranos of the school. Abaya Famuka. Sabreading in Ano. They say one na. You almost say free education. Results need to be here. When you go and teachers, can you do motivate teachers? And now one more child here. You know one answer teachers. You must say simple. Or more crap for my child. You 1 year in Jomoka. When you go at this young, Obaya this young, Galam said on go food. No, I say why you can have and go Felix say and now all the cats say a year teacher for no more day or more every. I shall plan to say and I'm on Grana Philly. And you go to some better.
Nana,
200,000. We are toying with their destinies. We are toying with their futures. Instead of you to find something sensible be ka che Ghana ne awofo ne akoye ni mu no what ba se sia man ko Felix poto sei atama wo ka che no enko 200,000 entimi enko mani say Mama is a hoop. Quite Felix poto say we hoop. We hoop. Say and me Yera Mahama pese what it will be answer no be a casabwash and yum. The Kwaakye Ghana 42 million. Chief Justice when you know in na babeto judiciary for so. And then she can die. Judge wo next judgment of the Mai. Obia ono de na asoma court. Oba court no o se o. Na se mu here ni nyina no e fa 41 police stations so confect.
Aha, na we di ansa na obeto aso ho no. Enkomo a wo mo bo we kire ne se. Na the entire constituency but on to me for polling centers ni na manti we no. What they no buy. Say wo de judge ne hwe.
Nana
kakra kra ni.
Se be yakasa asemu. Se wo say entire constituency. Na one fa bi ankora de 41 pe ne koy. Afterthought tro so omo hu say atentini na judge na sidi class. Atemu wo de ma ya se be etro kan no. Yempe bibi ne yemfa kata so. Wo kwa so na ebra yen ye ko even 2013 presidential but look at the pink sheet there go 11,000. Ma TPM di nyina audit ye. Na wo 151 pe. Na so office say asem wo hwa na wo fa ni nyenko. 151 pe. Almost 41 na 41 kwa we even opposed it. But wo de yemfa mo kwa nya asem. Obi de na asem abaso wo 41. And I'm watching one. 41 watching one who the 41 about the house. Don't worry. Me 151 cry. Sama judge in the Juma. A bra yet to Abana. NDC who say Omodincho. Name who say presidential and the NPP 4. And there was that deliberate strategy all young Pony say Balobosuno. You can trust them. Omoya ya na electoral commission said that you see because we are not almost equal to Kwano. The electoral commission. Or no sabi. A year some admit you one fan ko sheko one fan ko difi. Oroko tamale. A lot of the coalition and some woman the bank Obuasi is there. Baby honoma and yet baby bear about 10 or so constituencies no regional capitals. Judge said there be anywhere 151 in them. How? And when also the deputy say answer na be BBC mu. She ne say nia wo fi say basa yo bi e course wa anko so no. Eno no enyam sunsanso boni bi e wo abatwo no. Outcome na. Judge man a pass also we BBM. Now we question the law na name some na judgment now the assem na won say as him. Regulation 48 of CI 41 I can NPP so wo candidate. Yeah coalition. So wo so agent wo so ni so agent ni ho. Say presiding officer no and am na so declare and for who say wo ho na say wo because omuhwe hu say obi wo ho olu so be shada kase mema na ne ama dwumadie no akan sinsimu it is said presiding officer be from na so there na dwuma be declare what the pink sheet declare from 8A ni nyina what the agye ne bibia kama no de e bra ne be jatum papa yi man pass also twem. The reason is na candidate ni any ho and as an agent any ho they don't do twem how no I am running say omo ni ho bad judgment reckless judgment na dey ameka say one na omo mema sa judgment ni nyina no e ye hu bia ye dey aba be sa judges for mu bi na me say there are bold ones out there. They should do their work well. but don't they say abronye na judge mu a e court Idi Amin na judge mu a e ka say ai Ghana mremu no e kire say yina ye pe e wo mra nanim nanso no se wo ba asetere mu pa de a enye pe saa ebi e wo so ebi how na judge kan say mo say won rule mu wodi hu ene kasa
nana whether other my ruling is or more contest or appeals court
and no court of appeal yes sir court of appeal for Indio Mujuma and I had a course for parliament you ran baby why now do ruling abundance you our hands at the more hands at you ha making I can cancel while ruling out the buy and say stand say at seminal court of appeal you know you bet train not at seminal or medini every and sana ya the cat hakuma easy for say easy enye dey the vacancy bi abase impo sa na be kona sa na the question the ekosi here Ekos High Court the ruling by ye twenya ma ne court of appeal asem ne predu kwa appeal Supreme Court and sa na ye jatuma ye koye by election e wa asem no nti si den na nipa wo di ruling aba na wonam koti kwan so sebe speaker wanya de kwa na do ruling aba ruling wa ha no wo branch American time crackle why na do ruling aba so we say asem no e wo court of appeal no yen twen na court ni ndi o masemo wi o mu di wi
na 19 all this no
na udi ma bia ha dwe na no e kwa akotia unim sika nko aban e ka se wadi e wo security ho 39 million Ghana cedis. 39 million Ghana cedis akotia.
Na 90 we ina mu no NPP as a party mo boaboa mo ho asie say in an unlikely event say antentem wo court a na by election ne beba so a.
Sia de yenu sa tenten yankoso. Obi an so ne nya no aye kamya ko sa asisi no de. President Muhammad and Kofo Keka will be able to there be some of us will never be quiet. Many mama catch when I need the hope if he said Dokuma at Washington will be able to say, oh, I mean, it's really someone said, Yafina, Yadiko. It is clear in the face of the Lord that the judgment now upon the mouth Tamalino a bad. We are calling on the court of appeal. Say they should be bold to reverse this. This canker cannot be allowed to fester.
And mo chama ruling abansa na mo bebo abo mo amabo.
Say near corner papa no ma the born in the a year court of appeal will reverse the situation. This is so clear in the face of the law.
Na ne nda sia no pay.
Yamenka.
Awie abusiafo. So that is it. Enti na BC obema aban 3/100. Na bi na mi se bibi ha no. Oko skuti 3/100 da. Duzo obi akutwa 3 bibi ha no. Senka Ghana for se omo kire omo anka nyamo NPP for mu na mbeka ho. Nka by now demonstration gina so chenchije. Na nsi aguta Ghana Union of Trade Association and as a Traders Association. Omo ankasa president Aba Montin so say she said the matete spare pass so. Kwa boso kan ya. He na bi na oti ho. Oti sa asem ni bi. Mu di agoro. Mu MPP for we no. Mu di agoro. I'm telling you. Mu behave as if say mu kwa na mu ti Ghana ha. Mu behave as if say mu ko position a an Ghana ni bia so ho kire no. Sika mu wie mu di sasa. Until you think say amochira bo man mu. Of course, some of us and as some of you mu be experience amochire. But it is not as a result of mismanagement of the economy, and you can attest to that fact. The economy it is a bouncing economy. I recover from a kufado ni economy ni bomiamu economy. I recover and yanka say you could say who say and Ghana ye Ghana is doing well. Ghana is making a lot of money through good board. moto wonom na moyɛ didi galamsey sɛ de mapen so ne nsuo asia yɛ nsuo adan kyese 10 million de kai kan ko gina hɔ wotimi de pan ho bom di ne ade ene mo hu saa videos ni bi obu na mo so adwuma mo yɛ ene mo hu saa videos ni bi bibisa mo ene mo hu saa complaints mo pen so na MPP for mo kokuku ani bi a wado asiwa ɛwɔ asante mamu baabi ɔde camera si n'anim ɛbɛka sɛ koku nsuo afa ne koku asiwa ampa so na ogina nsuo mu nsuo ne deda Nil ne kotodwe ne Nil koku asiwa kama pa nto de bufu etwa koku ne gu no de na sase to galamsey NDC for by Martins ne bi montina se na munye mu ho ayi na Ghana for sisi na Ghana mon kasanse Ghana for ya no saa 2028 besini duro ho we will show you where the power lies. So mo se mo de munja propaganda na munye genuine politics wo krom ha. Mo dollar mo betina so mfie mbotwe mutumi manage dollar mani duro even 12 cedis kra. Mo fa dollar free 4 cedis or something like that. Mo huru na 17 cedis pa. And NDC is working hard to recover all these things. Look at the humility of John Mahama and Mami Jane Opokwajima and the ministers, the CEOs, the able CEOs. Ejuma moye yura ejidite mokulo samijem finom and Malik Basintali num or makika. Look at the kind of ejuma moye no kroma mutu wonu na moye dede yankasa 2028 bedru na mo be num se mo sankasa ade mu kra mu no mo wi kra no na dini ba ko saboje bi jana no se mo di nkunim etini enye nwa se na muti fi mu be ka se Ghana fo anya bi mi wa Ghana fo me kan hwe Ghana fo anya bra e me kan che mo MPP fo no an se TC street from Osu Adabraka e hwane eno an se ye demonstration anya obi na be ka but aban we ba mat se obi demonstration se kom di obi wan se obi demonstration se amomoni nkoyi wan se obi demonstration se enkofo muntuo nkofo birinka wontina na munye ne amope na ebedru ho no mo be hu se Ghana fo ye na edi tumi ma political party bi man bi di o man bi so enti wontina no na mo keka ne mo kana ebedru ho no kire wa yo concession hanum eyo number 1 authentic platform marketing yankopon enka ho na onhyira papa metian mega bye bye.